You're watching a Highwire Media podcast. What if the people you trust the most in a high-stakes operation could turn on you in an instant? How does one of the most powerful intelligence agencies in the world fall victim to the very threat they're trying to eliminate? Today we're uncovering the chilling details of the Camp Chapman attack, a devastating insider betrayal that shook the CIA to its core, leaving the agency to rethink its strategies in the war on terror. Stay with us as we dive into this tragic event and explore the long-lasting effects on U.S. intelligence operations. On December 30th, 2009, what seemed like a routine meeting at a small CIA base in Afghanistan turned into one of the deadliest attacks in the agency's history. A trusted informant walked through the gates of Camp Chapman, bringing with him the promise of crucial intelligence, only to reveal himself as an Al-Qaeda double agent with a suicide vest. The explosion killed 7 CIA officers and contractors, leaving behind not just shattered lives, but a deep scar on the CIA's trust in its own operations. On today's episode, we'll take you inside the events leading up to that tragic day, the devastating impact it had on U.S. intelligence, and how it forever changed the way the CIA operates in hostile environments. By the end of the episode, you'll understand why this attack was such a turning point in the war on terror, and how it exposed vulnerabilities that still challenge intelligence agencies today. Camp Chapman is located in the coast province of eastern Afghanistan. Was a relatively small but highly significant base for U.S. intelligence operations during the war on terror. Its importance lay not in its size, but in its strategic location and its role as a center for CIA operations targeting Al-Qaeda and Taliban leadership. Situated near the Pakistan border, Camp Chapman provided the CIA with a crucial foothold in one of the most dangerous and volatile regions in the world. The base was primarily used as a forward operating center for intelligence gathering, drone strike coordination, and managing informants in the region. Its proximity to the federally administered tribal areas of Pakistan, a haven for terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, made it an essential outpost for monitoring and intercepting insurgent movements. The base's significance was heightened by the fact that Pakistan's tribal regions were difficult for U.S. forces to access directly, making Camp Chapman a pivotal node for intelligence operations in the cross-border conflict. Camp Chapman also served as a key facility for handling human intelligence. The CIA relied heavily on local informants to gather actionable intelligence about Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and other extremist groups. Agents and contractors based at Camp Chapman regularly met with sources who could provide crucial details about terrorist networks, high-value targets, and upcoming attacks. This flow of intelligence was essential for U.S. military operations in Afghanistan and contributed directly to drone strikes aimed at top-level insurgents. Camp Chapman was at the heart of some of CIA's most sensitive and high-stakes missions in Afghanistan. The base functioned as an intelligence hub with a primary focus on identifying and eliminating high-value targets within Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. The intelligence gathered at Camp Chapman informed drone strike operations, which became one of the most effective tools for taking out senior members of these terrorist organizations. One of the main operational roles of Camp Chapman was coordinating predator drone strikes in the Afghanistan-Pakistan border region. The CIA used these strikes to take out key figures in terror organizations and disrupt their operations. The base was a linchpin in the CIA's targeted killing program, which aimed to dismantle terrorist networks by eliminating leadership figures before they could coordinate attacks against U.S. forces or civilians. This made Camp Chapman a key player in the broader U.S. strategy of using drone warfare as a means to degrade terrorist capabilities without putting American troops directly in harm's way. Additionally, the base played a critical role in managing relationships with local informants who were often Afghan or Pakistani nationals. These informants provided crucial intelligence on the whereabouts of Al-Qaeda leaders, Taliban movements, and impending attacks. Much of this intelligence was acquired through direct meetings at Camp Chapman, where CIA officers debriefed sources and assessed the credibility of their information. Given the base's centrality to both the CIA's counterterrorism efforts and the broader military campaign in Afghanistan, the work carried out at Camp Chapman had far-reaching effects. Its success in gathering actionable intelligence directly contributed to key victories in the fight against terrorism. But it also made the base a high-value target for Al-Qaeda, as the attack would later reveal. Despite its crucial role, Camp Chapman was not a heavily fortified military base like the larger forward operating bases that U.S. forces typically used. Instead, it was designed to operate under the radar, with its smaller size and less overt presence intended to avoid drawing attention from insurgent groups. The nature of the base's mission, to cultivate relationships with local informants, meant it needed to maintain a certain level of accessibility for outsiders, including local nationals. This created a unique challenge in balancing security with operational effectiveness. The security measures at Camp Chapman primarily focused on controlling access to the base. Visitors were subjected to screening processes, including searches and identity verification, but these procedures were sometimes relaxed for trusted sources, especially those who were perceived as valuable informants. This reliance on local intelligence created a complex security environment, as the CIA needed to foster relationships with potential allies in a region where loyalties were difficult to verify. Before the attack, Camp Chapman's defenses included multiple layers of security. The outer perimeter was guarded by the local Afghan forces, and CIA personnel, and entry was controlled through checkpoints. Visitors were required to clear these checkpoints before being granted access to the base. However, the reliance on Afghan guards, who may not have had the same training or loyalty as U.S. personnel, presented inherent risks. The base itself was not built to withstand large-scale military assaults, but was instead designed for low-profile intelligence work. This meant that while security protocols existed, they were not on the same level as those at larger military installations. The CIA trusted that the remote location, along with its vetting of informants, would provide sufficient protection. One of the base's vulnerabilities stemmed from the nature of this mission. In order to gather human intelligence, the CIA had to allow informants into the base, meaning outsiders frequently crossed its perimeter. While thorough vetting was in place, the reality of operating in such a volatile environment meant that any failure in screening or misplaced trust could lead to catastrophic consequences. In the case of the Camp Chapman attack, these vulnerabilities were exposed when Humam Khalil al-Pahlawi, posing as a trusted informant, was allowed to enter the base with minimal scrutiny. His perceived importance as a high-value source of intelligence led to the relaxation of normal security protocols, ultimately resulting in a devastating insider attack. This infiltration highlighted the difficulties of balancing operational necessity with security in high-risk environments like Afghanistan. By 2009, the conflict in Afghanistan had been raging for nearly a decade, with U.S. and coalition forces deeply entrenched in efforts to dismantle both the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. The mountainous regions along the Afghan-Pakistan border had become crucial battlegrounds. These areas, often referred to as the federally administered tribal areas, provided sanctuary for key Al-Qaeda leaders like Osama bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri. The U.S. military and CIA's primary objective was to disrupt these safe havens through a combination of ground operations, airstrikes, and intelligence-gathering missions. Drone warfare was becoming increasingly central to U.S. operations. The CIA used bases like Camp Chapman to coordinate precision drone strikes aimed at high-value targets, which had dealt significant blows to terrorist networks. However, the U.S. was fighting against an adaptive enemy. Al-Qaeda and the Taliban were increasingly relying on asymmetrical warfare tactics, including suicide bombings, insider attacks, and other forms of infiltration. By late 2009, the Obama administration ordered a surge of U.S. troops to Afghanistan, hoping to shift the tide in the war. However, tensions were growing within the intelligence community as the complexity of the conflict became more evident. Even with the surge of resources, Al-Qaeda and the Taliban were proving resilient, often regrouping in remote regions and launching fresh attacks on U.S. interests. The central figure in the Camp Chapman attack was Humam Khalil Abu Mullah al-Pahlawi, a Jordanian national who was recorded by Jordanian intelligence, known as the General Intelligence Directorate (GID). Al-Balali had a background in medicine and had initially come to the attention of Jordanian authorities due to his radical online posts supporting jihad. However, rather than imprisoning him, Jordanian intelligence saw an opportunity to turn him into a double agent. He convinced Jordanian officials and eventually the CIA that he could infiltrate Al-Qaeda's upper ranks and provide vital intelligence on its leadership. He was presented as a valuable asset who had insider access to top Al-Qaeda figures, including al-Zawahiri. CIA in particular was eager to exploit the potential connection, as targeting Al-Qaeda's leadership was a top priority in their counterterrorism operations. The key CIA officers involved in the attack included Jennifer Matthews, the chief of the base at Camp Chapman, who had overseen operations in the region and had placed her trust in Al-Balahi's intelligence. Also present was Harold Brown Jr., a highly respected officer who specialized in targeting high-level terrorists. The group at Camp Chapman was composed of experienced CIA operatives and contractors, all focused on gathering critical intelligence to support U.S. military efforts in the region. Al-Balawi's story of being a double agent placed him in a unique position. Over time, he provided just enough credible intelligence to build the trust of both the CIA and Jordanian intelligence. The information he shared led to successful strikes against mid-level Al-Qaeda targets, reinforcing the perception that he was a valuable informant who had infiltrated the heart of the terrorist organization. The CIA and GID believed that he was on the verge of delivering actionable intelligence against Ayman al-Zawahiri's location, one of the highest priority targets for U.S. counterterrorism operations. On the day of the attack, December 30th, 2009, Al-Balahi was invited to Camp Chapman for a personal debriefing. This was seen as a major opportunity for the CIA to receive game-changing intelligence. The base's security protocols, while typically strict, were relaxed due to his perceived importance as an informant. The fact that he had been vetted by Jordanian intelligence further cemented the trust placed in him. He arrived at the base in Khost Province, Afghanistan, and was greeted as a trusted ally. His car was waved through several security checkpoints without the usual rigorous searches, as the CIA officers were eager to hear what he had to say. The expectation of high-valued intelligence led to a gathering of some of the most senior CIA officers at Camp Chapman for his arrival. Once inside the base, he was escorted into a secure area where he met with CIA officers and contractors. However, what they didn't know was that he was carrying a suicide vest underneath his clothing. As the officers prepared for the debriefing, he detonated the bomb, killing 7 CIA officers and contractors, a Jordanian intelligence officer, and wounded 6 others. The attack was meticulously planned by Al-Qaeda, who had groomed Al-Balawi as a double agent. They exploited the CIA's need for high-value intelligence and used it to orchestrate one of the most devastating insider attacks in the agency's history. This breach not only cost lives, but also demonstrated the vulnerability of intelligence operations in war zones, where trust in local informants and assets can be a double-edged sword. The attack sent shockwaves through the intelligence community, revealing how deeply Al-Qaeda could penetrate U.S. operations and how the tactics of trust and manipulation were being weaponized by the enemy. It exposed the dangers of balancing operational necessity with security, as well as the complexities of working with local informants in a region where loyalties were often difficult to ascertain. The events of December 30th, 2009 at Camp Chapman unfolded as a meticulously planned betrayal, orchestrated by Al-Qaeda to deliver a devastating blow to the CIA. The stage had been set months before, as Al-Balahi, a Jordanian doctor turned double agent, skillfully manipulated his way into the trust of both Jordanian intelligence and the CIA. He had posed as a valuable informant with direct access to Al-Qaeda's inner circle, specifically claiming to have information about the whereabouts of Ayman al-Zawahiri, the second in command of Al-Qaeda. In the days leading up to the attack, the CIA officers stationed at Camp Chapman were eager for what they believed could be a breakthrough in their operations. Al-Balahi had delivered valuable intelligence in the past, helping the agency target mid-level Al-Qaeda figures. His potential connection to high-ranking leaders made him one of the most important informants in their network. The base's leadership believed they were on the verge of acquiring actionable intelligence that could lead to the capture or killing of al-Zawahiri, a major victory in the War on Terror. On the morning of December 30th, al-Balahi arrived at the gates of Camp Chapman in Khost Province, Afghanistan. His arrival, like we said, was highly anticipated, and the base was abuzz with the possibility of receiving game-changing intelligence. Security protocols, which were strict, were relaxed due to the perceived importance of his visit. As a trusted informant, his car was waved through the multiple security checkpoints with minimal scrutiny. Senior CIA officers, including Jennifer Matthews, the chief of the base, and other high-ranking operatives, gathered in a meeting area to greet their informant. The expectation of vital intelligence about Al-Qaeda's leadership prompted them to overlook standard safety precautions, such as requiring him to be searched or to remain at a distance before debriefing. The air was charged with optimism as the officers believed they were on the verge of securing significant intelligence. True crime fans, before we continue on with this story, I want to tell you about something that's going to take your love for storytelling to the next level, and that is Audible. With Audible, you can explore an unmatched library of audiobooks, podcasts, and exclusive originals, all available at your fingertips. Whether you're into gripping mysteries, thrilling true crime, or even self-help to power through your day, Audible has something for everyone. And here's the best part, just for my listeners, Audible is offering a free 30-day trial. Just head over to audibletrial.com/Larry21 to get started today. You'll get one free audiobook that you can keep forever, even if you cancel. Plus, you get full access to Audible's premium selection. I'm currently listening to The Stranger Beside Me by Anne Rule. It's an incredible deep dive into the mind of Ted Bundy, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. So what are you waiting for? Go to audibletrial.com/Larry21 and grab your free audiobook and start exploring today. Now, let's get back to the episode. Al-Qaeda had long recognized the importance of infiltrating U.S. intelligence operations. Their plan was to use al-Balahi as a double agent to exploit one of the CIA's greatest vulnerabilities, the need to rely on local informants to operate effectively in a hostile region like Afghanistan. He was not just any informant, he had been carefully cultivated to gain the trust of both the Jordanian and the CIA. This elaborate deception, planned over months, was one of Al-Qaeda's most sophisticated insider attacks. His transformation from a radical Islamist who posted inflammatory material online to a double agent trusted by the CIA and Jordanian intelligence was a deliberate ploy orchestrated by Al-Qaeda's leadership. He had provided credible, useful information in the past, which allowed him to build rapport with the CIA and the GID. This trust was the key to breaching the defenses at Camp Chapman. On the day of the attack, he arrived at the base with a suicide vest concealed beneath his clothing. Al-Qaeda understood that the CIA, in their eagerness to receive intelligence about Al-Qaeda's leadership, would likely relax security measures to accommodate a trusted informant like himself. The group's methodical planning paid off when he was allowed to bypass the usual security protocols. Once inside the base, al-Balahi was escorted to the meeting area where senior CIA officers had gathered. At this point, he was within close proximity to some of the agency's top operatives in the region. Instead of delivering the intelligence the CIA hoped for, he detonated his suicide vest in the midst of the group, unleashing a powerful explosion that left the base in chaos. The explosion was catastrophic, both in its physical destruction and the psychological blow it dealt to the CIA. The blast killed 7 CIA officers and contractors, including key personnel who had been leading the agency's counterterrorism efforts in Afghanistan. Among the dead was Jennifer Matthews, the base chief who had a long career with the CIA and had been responsible for coordinating drone strikes and intelligence operations in the region. Captain Sharif Ali bin Zayed, a Jordanian intelligence officer who had worked closely with the CIA, was also killed in the explosion. The force of the blast instantly reduced the meeting area to rubble, leaving bodies scattered and survivors disoriented. 6 others were seriously injured, some critically. The explosion not only claimed the lives of key CIA operatives, but also decimated the core team responsible for gathering intelligence in one of the most critical regions in the fight against terrorism. The immediate aftermath of the attack was one of confusion and horror. the base was thrown into disarray as medical personnel scrambled to treat the wounded and assess the full scale of the damage. The scene was one of devastation. Shattered buildings, bodies strewn across the ground, and smoke billowing from the site of the explosion. Survivors struggled to make sense of what had happened as the realization sank in that they had been betrayed by someone they had trusted. The psychological impact of the attack was profound. The loss of life was a devastating blow to the CIA's operations in Afghanistan. The attack exposed vulnerabilities in the agency's reliance on human intelligence. The attack at Camp Chapman was a stark reminder of the dangers inherent in operating in a region where loyalties were constantly shifting and where the lines between friend and foe could easily blur. In addition to the loss of personnel, the attack crippled ongoing operations in the region. The death of senior officers meant that intelligence operations, particularly those focused on targeting Al-Qaeda leadership, were severely disrupted. The attack also cast a long shadow over the agency's approach to use local informants, forcing a re-evaluation of the risks involved in working with sources in hostile environments. Al-Qaeda's ability to infiltrate one of the CIA's most important outposts and execute such a devastating attack marked a significant victory for the terrorist organization. It was not just a physical breach of the base, but a symbolic attack on the heart of U.S. intelligence operations. The loss of life, the destruction of intelligence assets, and the breach of trust all contributed to making the Camp Chapman attack one of the most devastating moments in CIA history. Camp Chapman's significance lay in its role as one of the CIA's most active and covert intelligence gathering hubs, strategically located in the Khost province near the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. The border region, particularly the federally administered tribal areas in Pakistan, was a notorious safe haven for Al-Qaeda leadership and other extremist groups, including the Taliban. The remoteness and lawlessness of these areas made them ideal for training camps, meeting spots, and hideouts for Al-Qaeda operatives, including high-profile leaders like Osama bin Laden and Ayman al-Zawahiri. Camp Chapman's location gave the CIA critical proximity to these insurgent strongholds. From there, CIA personnel were able to launch surveillance missions, direct drone strikes, and run clandestine intelligence operations across the border into Pakistan, where Al-Qaeda leadership was often thought to be hiding. This access allowed the U.S. to track and neutralize high-value targets, disrupting terrorist operations, keeping pressure on Al-Qaeda. For Al-Qaeda, Camp Chapman represented a direct threat to their leadership's survival and operational capacity. In addition, Camp Chapman functioned as a logistics and intelligence hub, where the CIA coordinated efforts with local informants and other intelligence sources. The base was pivotal in organizing covert actions and drone strikes that targeted Al-Qaeda's leadership and infrastructure, making it a nerve center for U.S. counterterrorism efforts in the region. For Al-Qaeda, eliminating or crippling this base would not only deal a devastating blow to the CIA's intelligence operations, but would also hinder future U.S. military actions in the region. Al-Qaeda's decision to target Camp Chapman was rooted in both tactical and symbolic motivations. On a tactical level, the group understood that Camp Chapman's intelligence operations posed a direct and ongoing threat to its leadership. The CIA's drone program, directed in part from Camp Chapman, had become one of the most lethal tools in the U.S. arsenal, responsible for the deaths of numerous mid- and high-level Al-Qaeda operatives. These drone strikes were often based on human intelligence collected by CIA operatives and informants stationed at bases like Camp Chapman. By targeting the base, Al-Qaeda sought to disrupt the flow of intelligence that was feeding these operations, and in turn, slow the pace of U.S. counterterrorism efforts. A successful attack on Camp Chapman would also have profound psychological and operational consequences for the CIA and broader U.S. intelligence community. Al-Qaeda knew that the loss of experienced CIA personnel, many of whom were seasoned experts in counterterrorism, would cripple the agency's ability to conduct future operations. The death of key officers would not only result in immediate operational setbacks, but also send a chilling message throughout the intelligence community, underscoring the vulnerability of even high-level operatives in supposedly secure environments. Moreover, the method of the attack, using a trusted informant who had infiltrated the CIA's inner circle, was a calculated blow to the trust-based relationships on which much of the CIA's work depended. Al-Qaeda recognized that the CIA's effectiveness in regions like Afghanistan and Pakistan relied heavily on local sources of human intelligence. By using Humam Kali al-Abu Mullah Balawi, a Jordanian doctor who posed as a double agent, Al-Qaeda was able to exploit this system of trust and weaponize the informant network against the CIA. This would sow doubt and mistrust in future relationships between the CIA and local informants, making it more difficult for the agency to gather reliable intelligence in the future. And before we move on, I would like to apologize if I'm butchering this terrible man's name, but honestly, for being who he is, I don't know if I really want to apologize that much. Scum of the universe doesn't deserve to have his name pronounced properly. So, with that, we'll move on. Additionally, the symbolic impact of the attack cannot be understated. Al-Qaeda had long targeted high-profile U.S. installations, but attacking a CIA base, an emblem of U.S. intelligence, was a major propaganda victory. The attack demonstrated that even the CIA, with its vast resources and expertise, could be infiltrated and its personnel targeted. For a terrorist organization whose success depends in part on its ability to project strength and resilience, such an attack bolstered Al-Qaeda's image and proved that it could still strike powerful blows against its enemies, despite years of being pursued by the US. Finally, the attack also had strategic operations for Al-Qaeda in terms of its broader goal of weakening the US presence in the region. By undermining the CIA's operation at Camp Chapman, Al-Qaeda hoped to reduce US effectiveness in Afghanistan and Pakistan, creating more space for the organization to regroup, reorganize, and rebuild its network. If the US intelligence community lost confidence in its informant networks or pulled back operations due to security concerns, Al-Qaeda would have more freedom to operate in these critical regions without the constant threat of drone strikes or targeted raids. Camp Chapman was not just a physical outpost, it was a critical operational hub for the CIA's counterterrorism strategy in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region. The base's primary mission was to collect human intelligence from local sources, informants who had deep knowledge of Al-Qaeda and the Taliban operations. This intelligence was crucial in building a detailed picture of terrorist activities, identifying potential targets, and preemptively disrupting attacks. One of the most vital operations running out of Camp Chapman was the coordination of drone strikes. The drone program had become one of the most effective tools in eliminating Al-Qaeda operatives, especially in areas where the US military could not easily operate. These drones, often directed from bases like Chapman, conducted precision strikes on high-value targets, severely weakening Al-Qaeda's leadership. Key strikes, such as those targeting Batullah Masood, the leader of the Pakistani Taliban, and other senior operatives, were the result of intelligence gathered and processed at Camp Chapman. In addition to drone operations, the CIA at Camp Chapman worked closely with local informants who had provided detailed information on Al-Qaeda movements, hideouts, and leadership meetings. These informants were often Afghan or Pakistanis with deep ties to local communities or insurgent groups. They fed intelligence to the CIA, which in turn was used to plan targeted strikes or raids. The base's role in managing these informant networks made it a linchpin for ongoing operations across the region. The operations running out of Camp Chapman were not confined to Afghanistan alone. They also had a significant impact on the US campaign against insurgents in Pakistan. Since Pakistan's tribal areas were largely inaccessible to US ground forces, the intelligence from Camp Chapman allowed the CIA to maintain pressure on Al-Qaeda's leaders who used these areas as safe havens. This cross-border dynamic meant that Camp Chapman played a vital role in bridging the intelligence gap between Afghanistan and Pakistan, where many terrorist groups operated with impunity. Camp Chapman's high-value status also came from its intelligence analysis capabilities. Beyond gathering raw data, the CIA personnel at the base were responsible for vetting and analyzing the intelligence received from informants. This analysis allowed the CIA to make quick decisions about potential targets and to launch operations with real-time precision. The effectiveness of these operations depended on having a secure, well-connected base like Camp Chapman to filter through the vast amounts of information gathered from various sources. Finally, the base was crucial for U.S.-Jordanian intelligence cooperation. The CIA worked closely with Jordan's General Intelligence Directorate. Camp Chapman was one of the key sites for joint operations. The relationship between the U.S. and Jordan was especially important in the context of counterterrorism, as Jordan had access to unique sources of intelligence in the region. The presence of Captain Sharif Ali bin Zayed, a Jordanian officer killed in the attack, underscores the significance of this operation. For Al-Qaeda, striking Camp Chapman was not only about targeting the CIA, but also disrupting broader international intelligence partnerships. The immediate aftermath of the Camp Chapman attack was one of shock, chaos, and emergency response. The explosion left the CIA base in a state of disarray, with 7 CIA officers and contractors killed, 6 others injured, and severe damage to the base's infrastructure. In the first few hours following the attack, emergency medical personnel and military support were rushed to the site to treat the wounded and secure the area. Helicopters were dispatched to evacuate the injured, and U.S. military forces nearby were put on high alert, fearing that the bombing could signal the start of a broader assault. The CIA and U.S. military quickly secured the perimeter of Camp Chapman, launching a full-scale investigation into how the attack had occurred and who was responsible. The blast site was treated as a crime scene, with forensic teams combing through the wreckage to piece together the events leading up to the explosion. Intelligence officers were tasked with analyzing the infiltration, determining whether any other informants could have been compromised, and assessing the full scale of the security breach. Within hours, CIA leadership in Langley, Virginia, were informed of the devastating loss, and a crisis response team was mobilized. The focus of the CIA's immediate response was twofold: ensuring the safety of remaining personnel at Camp Chapman and preventing any further infiltration or attacks on other intelligence bases in the region. Across Afghanistan and Pakistan, the CIA's local operations were placed on high alert, with heightened security protocols enacted at other CIA bases to prevent a repeat of the incident. The U.S. military, in coordination with the CIA, also increased security measures in the region, particularly along the Afghanistan-Pakistan borders where Al-Qaeda had been operating. U.S. forces in the area began conducting intelligence sweeps and increased drone surveillance to track any movement of insurgent groups. Military commanders were instructed to assist in securing CIA operations across Afghanistan, as the attack had exposed vulnerabilities in the network of intelligence outposts. The attack on Camp Chapman revealed several critical vulnerabilities within the CIA's operations, particularly in its reliance on human intelligence. The breach underscored the inherent risk in trusting local informants and highlighted a significant gap in the agency's security protocols when dealing with high-value sources. The fact that this sick bastard, a trusted double agent, was able to infiltrate a CIA base and carry out a suicide bombing without being thoroughly searched or vetted exposed a flaw in the trust-based systems that the agencies had developed to foster local intelligence networks. In the years following the Camp Chapman attack, several new revelations and insights have emerged that shed more light on both the planning and execution of the bombing, as well as the vulnerabilities exposed within the CIA. One of the most significant revelations has been the extent of Al-Qaeda's sophisticated infiltration strategy. Through the use of this sick bastard, Al-Qaeda was able to exploit the CIA's reliance on local informants in Afghanistan, leveraging this vulnerability to carry out the attack. Investigations and intelligence reports have since revealed that this sick bastard had been carefully groomed by Al-Qaeda's leadership over an extended period of time. New reports indicate that Al-Qaeda viewed this operation as a major propaganda victory, with the organization later boasting about how they had successfully deceived the CIA. In addition, debriefs from the CIA officers and U.S. military personnel in Afghanistan have brought to light some of the internal failures in the lead-up to the attack. These accounts point to a growing sense of complacency in the handling of high-profile informants, such as the sick terrorist, where security protocols were relaxed due to the perceived value of the intelligence he was providing. This insight has led to a reassessment of how the CIA handles informants, particularly those with access to high-ranking terrorist leaders. Over time, several declassified documents and insider accounts provided a clearer picture of the events leading up to and following the Camp Chapman attack. One key document revealed was a CIA internal report that outlined the missteps in intelligence vetting and security at Camp Chapman. The report criticized the agency's over-reliance on the assurances provided by Jordanian intelligence, noting that proper vetting procedures for this sick bastard had been bypassed, despite the high stakes involved in his visit to the base. Declassified communications between the CIA and Jordan intelligence further underscore the urgency and pressure both agencies felt in their pursuit of Ayman al-Zawahiri, one of Al-Qaeda's top leaders. The desperation to obtain actionable intelligence on such a high-value target may have contributed to the CIA's willingness to overlook certain security measures in favor of getting critical information as quickly as possible. These documents paint a picture of an intelligence community that was stretched thin, eager for breakthroughs, and willing to take significant risks in its search for terrorist leaders. In addition, insider accounts from survivors of the attack have provided first-hand details about the moments leading up to the explosion. One such account came from a CIA officer who described how routine security protocols were bypassed due to the high level of trust they had placed in the informant. This insider's account also highlighted the lack of suspicion among CIA officers, many of whom viewed the terrorist as a crucial ally in the fight against Al-Qaeda, underscoring the devastating impact of the betrayal. Another important document that has emerged is a classified after-action report that includes recommendations for improving security at CIA outposts in conflict zones. This report, though heavily redacted, led to sweeping changes in how the agency approaches informant management and security at remote bases. The reforms introduced in the aftermath of Camp Chapman aim to prevent such a devastating insider attack from happening again. The Camp Chapman attack delivered harsh lessons to the CIA and other intelligence agencies regarding the inherent risks of conducting operations in hostile environments, particularly when dealing with human intelligence. One of the most significant lessons learned was the dangers of over-reliance on informants, especially in regions where loyalties could easily shift. The agency had placed too much trust in Humam Khalil Abu Mullah al-Balawi, a double agent posing as a trusted informant without adequately verifying his true allegiance. This misstep revealed critical flaws in the CIA's vetting processes and underscored the importance of continually reassessing the reliability of intelligence sources. The attack also highlighted the vulnerability of CIA forward operating bases in conflict zones. The ease which the informant entered Camp Chapman, bypassing typical security protocols, due to the trust placed in him, emphasized the need for stricter, more consistent security measures, even for trusted individuals. This betrayal served as a sobering reminder that even the most reliable, seeming informants can be manipulated by enemy forces. As a result, the agency learned to treat every informant with a higher degree of suspicion, regardless of past performance or the seeming credibility of their intelligence. Furthermore, the attack revealed the psychological manipulation that terrorist organizations, like Al-Qaeda, could use against intelligence agencies. Al-Qaeda understood the CIA's desperation for high-value intelligence, particularly information that could lead to the capture of key figures like Ayman al-Zawahiri. By exploiting the urgencies, they were able to engineer a devastating insider attack. This led the CIA to reflect on the pressure of high-stakes intelligence missions, which can sometimes lead to dangerous lapses in judgment. The enduring impact of the Camp Chapman attack on U.S. intelligence operations is significant. It fundamentally altered how the CIA and other intelligence agencies approach risk management, security, and intelligence gathering in conflict zones. The attack prompted the agency to implement more rigorous security protocols, not only in Afghanistan, but in all hostile environments where local sources played a crucial role in gathering intelligence. There was a marked shift towards a more balanced intelligence strategy, integrating technological intelligence and signal intelligence alongside human sources to cross-verify this information and reduce dependency on a single channel. The event also shaped how intelligence agencies view insider threats and the potential for infiltration, leading to enhanced counterintelligence operations designed to detect and neutralize these risks before they can manifest. Culturally, the attack left a deep imprint on the CIA, reminding operatives that trust must always be tempered with caution, especially in regions where ideological enemies might exploit any weakness. The attack also led to the broader psychological preparedness of CIA officers, emphasizing resilience and emotional balance in high-stress environments. Intelligence work, particularly in volatile regions, requires agents to constantly navigate ambiguity and danger, and the Camp Chapman attack reinforced the need for preparedness at every level. As we reflect on the Camp Chapman attack and its legacy, several critical questions remain about the ongoing challenges of intelligence work in hostile environments. How can intelligence agencies better balance the need for high-value information with the security risk posed by local informants? What further steps can be taken to mitigate insider threats, especially dealing with double agents or compromised sources? How can the psychological toll of operating in high-risk environments be managed to prevent cognitive biases and lapses in judgment? What role should technological advancements such as AI and surveillance play in supplementing or even replacing traditional human intelligence gathering in conflict zones? The Camp Chapman attack remains a pivotal event in the history of U.S. intelligence, one that continues to shape how agencies operate in hostile regions. As the nature of conflict evolves, so too must the strategies for gathering intelligence, balancing security with operational needs, and safeguarding the lives of those working on the front lines of global counterterrorism efforts. Now that we reach the end of this episode on the Camp Chapman attack, we'd like to remind you to give us a thumbs up if you like our video, hit that subscribe button down below, right down there, that shiny subscribe button. While you're at it, go right next to it and hit that bell notification button to be notified of future videos. And of course, if you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.